The crime scene was staged, Lincoln Rhyme said. The Bone Collector by Jeffrey Deaver follows paralyzed detective Lincoln Rhyme and his partner, and eyes and ears, Amelia Sachs, as they investigate the murders of the Bone Collector, a diabolical villain obsessed with leaving clues to test how smart the police truly are. Now, it's such a great book with a really fast-moving plot, and because it's a murder mystery, it's really hard to talk about without spoilers, but it's super good, and it feels a lot faster, too, because the whole thing takes place over, like, the span of a weekend, as opposed to, like, dragging out for a really long time, so there's this heightened sense of urgency that makes the book really fast, and even though it's a long book, it's really easy to read really quickly. And so I think you all should go read it. And this is also going to be part 1 of 2 in my Bone Collector series because recently NBC released a Bone Collector TV show. And so for the next part of my Bone Collector series, I'm going to be watching and reviewing the TV show and kind of comparing the differences between the book and the TV show. Books, TV, music, and movies. All things that make a big impact on everyone. I'm constantly gushing about my latest read to anyone who will listen, so I figured I'd turn my rambling into something coherent and that people will actually listen to, which means no tuning out halfway through. I am Maya Ghosh, and this is my take. So as always with a book, we are starting on a little bit on the writing, and for this one I really wanted to focus on Lincoln and how his character is the perfect anti-hero because he is very flawed, not just physically being in a wheelchair, but he is always concerned with the evidence and the data and doesn't really care about the people, and he wants to end his own life because of his paralysis and because he doesn't want to keep living like that, and you have to root for him because he is the only one capable of figuring out the Bone Collector schemes, but you also, want to shake him and change him, and you get really angry at him. It's really hard to like him as a person and not just like the work that he does, at least in the beginning. And so I thought that it was really cool that the central kind of character in which the book revolves around, it revolves around Amelia and Lincoln, but one of the central characters is so flawed. It makes it really interesting, especially when we're used to, I think, in book, TV, media portrayals of cops being either really good and, the good guy, the one you trust, whatever, or bad and corrupt, but completely bad and corrupt and acknowledging their bad and corruptness. And I think that Lincoln is a perfect blend of, he's definitely a very good cop and a very good person, but he does compartmentalize and he is very scientifically focused, which you would think being a cop you would care a lot about people and saving people and helping people. So I think it's a really good balance, and I think that made Lincoln a lot more interesting to read about. And that is all I will have to say on the writing. Moving on to just kind of the general plot, the feel, how it's going on. I didn't really have anything to break it down into sections for this. I just hit out a list of points that I wanted to talk about, so we will see where this takes us. But for all I said about Lincoln, the book in the beginning does feel a little impersonal, just because it does happen so quickly. There is so much of a heightened focus on the murder mystery and what's going on with the Bone Collector and the clues and everything, that we lose kind of that feeling of the characters and getting to know them and getting their personal lives and getting their backgrounds and all that stuff. We lose that in exchange for more emphasis on the Bone Collector, which I don't think is bad, but it does lend itself to a little bit of kind of impersonability. That's not a word, but I'm going to go with it. Impersonability for the beginning of the book. But despite its impersonability, which is now a word in my world, I love Tom, Lincoln's caregiver. He's so funny and so great and so sarcastic and just combats every single thing that Lincoln says and is like, no, I know what's best for you, Lincoln, and you're being stupid, and I love him, and I need somebody like that in my life. I just want a Tom next to me throughout my entire day. It's great. And speaking of other characters I love the two Hardy Boy detectives and how they interact and just how they're bounce so perfectly back off of one another, and how they're so dedicated to their work too. I mean, they interview hundreds of people all the time, and they're just so great. And even though they're such minor characters, every time they come up in the book, I loved them, and I was like, yes, the Hardy Boys are here, it will all be okay. I also love the Lincoln and Amelia love story. I'm a sucker for love stories, as you all know, and the way it unfolded was just so perfect because it was so subtle and it didn't take up a big chunk of the book, right? You think it is a murder mystery, so they did focus on the murder mystery, and it was so subtle, and it didn't really happen until the end after the bone collector, and I loved it, and it was so perfect. And when she got in the bed with him at the end, I was like, oh my god, I love her. And that was why it made it a lot harder for me to be like, why are you okay with Lincoln ending his life at the end? I was like, what the hell? You shouldn't be okay with this. You're, like, in love with him or in like with him or whatever. Like, what the hell, Amelia? And I was very glad that he didn't, and that they came back in, and Carol, who was one of the victims, was tied into the end, because it saved Lincoln's life, and it made a really great, like, unique ending, because it tied in the fact that they had done all this work with the bone collector, and kind of that undercurrent of, oh, what's going to happen with the UN conference, because that whole time I was like, the bone collector is not aiming for the UN conference. That cannot be a thing. So why do they keep talking about it? What is going on? So I really liked that one of the victims ended up being the link to the UN conference, and it showed that Lincoln's work is meaningful because, I mean, he saved so many lives, and even though one of those lives comes back to be a terrorist, the fact that it shows and gives him a better representation of the lives that he has saved is really good, and I was very glad, and I've loved that it kind of ended that way and it wrapped up. Even though I've read the description for the next book in the series, because technically Lincoln Rhyme is a series that Jeffrey Deaver wrote, but I'm pretty sure it's one of those series where the end of one book doesn't directly translate into the beginning of the next. I think it's more like the cast of characters stay the same and they jump throughout different books. So I don't know if I'm going to read the next one, because I would have read it had it been the, like, Carol story going through, because I really wanted to see that, but I don't know. We will see. But yeah, that whole thing segue was to basically say I love the Lincoln and Amelia love story. And I guess talking about the end, I seriously thought that Pauling was going to be the bone collector at the end, and I got really scared because I didn't want him to be guilty, and I really wanted the bone collector to be somebody, like, outside, even though that makes no sense because, like, they deal with Lincoln and it's Ben Lincoln and all that kind of stuff, so I didn't want it to be Pauling, and I was very glad that it wasn't Pauling, but then I was very sad that it was Pete, and I didn't like that Pauling had to die, and I didn't want Pete to be guilty because he seemed, like, really nice and really kind, and I loved him. But I guess he was the only logical person because, like, giving it to Pete and making Pete the bone collector did kind of tie it back to Lincoln, and it made sense. It wasn't just this, like, rando serial killer. And I liked that we got all the different perspectives, including the bone collectors, because even though the bone collector's perspectives were kind of weird because he kept shifting in and out between, like, 1900s New York and current New York and all that kind of stuff, I liked that we at least got to see it, and I liked that it didn't spoil his identity for us, and it kept that reveal really big, but we did get to see his perspective and his point of view, though I could have done without the scenes in his house, because his house was so gross, oh my god, and the tunnel to the other random house with the dog and the like, ugh, it was just nasty, And on that note, I have no clue how much of the forensic stuff is true. I had no interest in looking into it, whatever. But it was really interesting, kind of the techniques and how Lincoln was so knowledgeable about New York City and all of the history. And that is something that gets explored a little more in the TV show, which I have already watched and have prepped my episodes. So I will say I will bring that up more in kind of the next installment of the Lincoln Rhyme, but I did really like looking at all the forensics. I know a lot of forensics is not necessarily true to what forensics we have available to us in real life, but it was really interesting, and that was a big point of the book too, was how they could use these small little clues to figure out where people were and where people were hiding. Like, I could never be a Lincoln Rhyme. I'm not smart enough. I do not care to look into enough stuff to do that. Like, that is insane and also really cool and a really cool selling point to the book. I'm sure a lot of it is not entirely true. I'm sure a lot of it is based in some sort of reality. I wish it was all true. I wish that was possible in real life. But yeah, I love that he makes Amelia put rubber bands on her shoes. That is really funny and something that I miss terribly in the TV series. And I need to stop giving away spoilers for my TV episode because that's coming next. You guys have to wait for that. But I love that, and I love their dynamic and how he talks her through all the things and how she's not afraid to get mad at him and get repulsed by the stuff that she's supposed to do. I mean, when he tells her to cut the lady's arms off so they can take the handcuffs, like, I love that she walks out and is like, yeah, no, not doing that. And I love that she, just shoots the rats, even though it can contaminate the crime scene, because the rats were eating at the lady who was stuck in the thing. It was Hannah, but pretty sure not Hannah. I don't remember her name. But I just love Amelia's, like, power and how strong she is and how she's not afraid to stand up to Lincoln, but also it creates a really good dynamic between the two. And that moment when Lincoln finally comes out and shows up when he thinks Amelia's been hurt and is at the crime scene and outside, I was very proud of him for that, and I love him. And it was just a really great book, because it's so fast-paced and so dense, but we do learn characters, and there is character building, and it's character building throughout this whole thing of, murder mystery. So even if you're not a huge, like, fluff romance fan, there's plenty, like, it is a murder mystery book, and it focuses on murder mystery, but it ties the two worlds together really well because there is human interaction and human connection and character development and growth, and Amelia falls in love, and Lincoln grows as a person and learns that he doesn't want to take his own life, and it's a really great book, and I really liked it, and I was really excited that there's a TV show, and I'm really excited to do my second installment and compare the differences, because I think that will be really interesting. So yeah, I have been Maya Ghosh, and this has been my take on The Bone Collector by Jeffrey Deaver. Thanks for listening.